Hi everyone, this is an overview of the SAT exam, specifically of the digital SAT exam. In this video, we're going to see what the SAT is, what is not, and I'm going to give you a general study plan for the SAT. Okay, we're going to jump right into it. We're going to start with what the SAT is. An SAT is a test that measures how well you can provide specific answers to specific questions. This is really important because this is not testing your general knowledge, it's just testing very specific things. Then the SAT is also something that you need to go study in college. If you're an international student, is what you need to go study in a university in the US or Europe. It's also an adaptive test. This is the digital SAT. This is a difference between the digital and the paper-based SAT. So what does this mean? This means that the second module on each section is going to depend, or the difficulty of the second module is going to depend on how well you perform in the first module. For example, you have reading and writing, you have module 1 and module 2. If you do everything correct in the first model, then the second model is going to be more difficult than the first model. If you have most of your answers wrong in the first module, then the second module is going to be easier than the first module. Now, does this mean that if you get easier question, your score is going to be lower if you get all the easy questions right? No. This only means that the questions are going to adapt so to how well you can perform. Now, in the digital SAT, you can also go back and forth between questions, which means during the same module, you can go, let's say, from question 2 to question 5, leaving unanswered questions 3 and 4, and then go back to questions 3 and 4. You can also mark a question so you can review it at the end of the module. So in the same module, you can go back and forth. And finally, this is a test with fixed objective answers. This is really important because it means the answers are not subject to discussion. The answer is just the answer. This is quite obvious in math where the number is just the number, but some people think that the answers in the verbal section are arguable, and they are not. There is one, or in the case of some math questions, more than one very specific fixed answers which are completely objective. Now, what the SAT is not an IQ test. The SAT is not measuring how smart, how intelligent you are. It's also not the ultimate proof of your academic performance. So you may have a very good history or academic performance during high school and still do very poorly in the SAT. Conversely, you can have a very poor academic performance during high school and actually score quite high in the SAT. It's also not an indicator of how well you do in life. Remember, this is just an exam that is testing very specific things for a very specific scenario. This does not translate of how successful you can be in other areas of your life. And finally, the SAT is not as hard as it seems. You have to learn some basic information. You do have to learn theory, and you do have to have knowledge, but you can also perform using a lot of strategy and tips and tricks. Okay, now we're gonna see what you should do before you start studying. So before you start doing your study plan, you have to take a practice test. This is very important so you know where you are exactly in the level of the SAT. Now you want to record your score and the date in which you took the test, and from there on you can see whether you're increasing or not increasing, whether you're improving or not improving from your base score. A second important thing is to know your goal. You want to know exactly what is the score that you want for the specific university, and when do you want to achieve this score. When are you going to take your official SAT? It's also important that you recognize your strengths and weaknesses. Again, this is really important. It's not about how you feel or what you think, it's about how you perform. So you may think that you're bad at math, but you actually perform quite well at math. Or you may think that you're very good at reading and actually perform quite poorly. So it's about the fact that you have a strength or a weakness in a very specific area. You should also plan how many hours you will actually devote to studying. This is really important. You have to do this, sit down and actually check out your schedule. Some people think that they can study 8 hours a day, but then they don't take into account that they have to sleep or eat or go out, or you may have extracurricular activities. And in theory, you are studying 8 hours a day, but in practice, you're studying just 2 or 3 hours a day. So you want to plan on how many hours you will actually give yourself to study. And finally, I recommend that you get a notebook, a real physical paper-based notebook. I recommend that you study, you do all of your studying, all of your note-taking, all of your strategies taking, note-taking, and your formulas on a real physical notebook. Do not use your laptop, do not use the screenshots, do not use your iPad or your phone. Actually write them down. Also, do not just print stuff on the internet. Write them down on your real physical notebook. Now, while you study, while you're studying, since you already have a physical real notebook, you want to take notes by hand. Again, you do not print the stuff, you actually copying them down by hand on your notebook. You also want to be organized. This means that you want to separate your notebook. If you only have one notebook, you want to separate it into reading, writing, and math. You can also have one separate notebook for each of these. And then in each section, you want to separate each section. For example, in the reading, you should separate theory and strategy and practice. So you should have like 5 to 6 pages for theory, you should have 3 to 4 pages for strategy, and then the rest is for practicing exercises. Then for math, for example, you should have theory, you should have formulas. This takes from 5 to 6 pages. Then you should have practice, where you're going to copy the exercises that you solve from homework or from the book that you're using. And finally, strategies. It's really important that your strategies and your formulas are all together in 5 to 6 pages, and they're not all spread out throughout your notebook, because then it's going to be really hard for you to find them. You want all your formulas to be together. Another important thing is that you have to respect your schedule. If you say you're going to study 4 hours a day, you have to study 4 hours a day. It is not good that you study 2 hours on the first day and then you try to move those 2 extra hours to the second day, and then you study 6 hours on the second day. That is not something that's going to help. You should just respect how many hours you're going to study each day. And finally, after you finish all the theory, you should do all the theory and practice first. Then you're going to move on to only doing full practice tests. So after all the theory, the reading, writing, and math theory, you're just going to perform on practice tests. Now, while you're taking the exam or the practice test, you are going to focus on, you're going to use a lot of strategy for all of the sections, for the reading, the writing, and the math strategy. You're going to focus on just choosing an answer every single time. Remember, it's better wrong than blank. So you always want to choose an answer. If you don't know the answer, you just have to guess. Okay, remember, guessing is good, guessing is okay. We want the guessing. Why? Because most of the questions in the SAT are multiple choice, so you have 4 alternatives, which means if you just completely randomly guess, you have at least a 25% chance of getting it right, which is definitely better than the 0% chance that you get if you just leave the question blank. And remember, the SAT does not have any penalty for wrong answers, which means if you just get it wrong, nothing happens. Okay, you just move on. Another important thing is that you have to mind your time. You want to know how long it takes to solve every question, and most importantly, you want to know how long it takes to take to the half of the exam and then perform for the other half of the exam. And finally, you want to stay hydrated while you're taking the exam or the practice test. Okay, now we're going to see how the SAT is structured. These are the sections of the SAT. Remember, this is the digital SAT, which is different from the paper-based SAT. If you're in the US, you're still taking the paper-based SAT until 2024. Okay, so we have 2 main sections, the verbal and the math section. The verbal is reading and writing. Here we have the 2 modules. Each module contains 27 questions each for a total of 54 questions. Okay, and in these 2 modules, you're going to take 64 minutes completely. After the first 2 modules of reading and writing, you get a 10-minute break. Okay, and then after the 10-minute break, you have the 2 math modules. The 2 math modules have 22 questions each for a total of 44 questions and a total of 70 minutes. The exam in total takes 2 hours and 14 minutes. It will be 2 hours and 24 minutes if you take into account the 10-minute break. Now we're going to see each section, the breaking down of each section. We're going to start with the verbal section, reading and writing. Remember, unlike the paper-based SAT, the new digital SAT contains reading and writing all together in one section. This is what we call the verbal section. So, the reading. All the reading questions are multiple choice questions. Remember, this means that you have 4 alternatives to choose, which means if you just completely randomly guess, you have at least a 25% of getting it right, and there is only one right answer. The reading section of the digital SAT contains very short text from 1 to 2 paragraphs. There are no more than 2 paragraphs. This is, again, a difference from the old paper-based SAT. And the topics of the readings are going to be literature, which include poems, are going to be science, which includes social sciences and hard sciences like biology or physics, and includes politics, which includes 19th and 20th century politics. Then we're going to go to the writing section. Remember, although it's called the writing section, you don't really have to write anything. In the new digital CT, you are no longer required to write anything. This is actually just testing your grammar. Again, these are all multiple choice questions. Same thing applies, which means you can completely and randomly guess. Okay. And the texts are at most one paragraph long. They are really not long. And finally, all you have to focus on is just following the rules of standard English grammar, standard formal English grammar. And that is pretty much it. Now we're going to go to the math section. Remember, unlike the old SAT, now we only have like one main math section, one main math section that is in two modules, okay? And they have the same topics. They're all about the same topics. Now, in the case of the math section, we have two types of questions. We have multiple choice questions. Again, we have four alternatives, A, B, C, D, which means we can completely randomly guess, and we have a 25% chance of getting it right. And we also have the green it questions, in which you have a blank space, or in this case, a little box where we have to manually input our answers. In this case, remember, you no longer have the 25% chance of getting it right if you choose just a random number, because you no longer have alternative. This does not mean that you should stop guessing. It just means that the chance of your getting the right answer is going to decrease. Finally, we have in this new digital SAT, calculators are allowed on both sections. It's not like the old SAT where you have one section with calculator and one section without calculator. A calculator is built in the program in which you're taking your SAT, but you can also bring your own calculator. You should check the specifications for the calculator in the official College Board webpage. And you have to remember that the math level of the SAT is just high school level math. For most international students, the math that you are studying in high school is actually higher and more difficult than the math that is tested in the SAT. Okay, remember, the math of the SAT is not college level calculus, and is not even higher level mathematics. Okay, so what is the study plan? I'm going to give you a general study plan. Remember, you can adapt this. This is pretty much what I give to my students, although we can sometimes adapt it to individual cases. Now, about the order in which I recommend that you study, I recommend that you start with the grammar. So I recommend that you learn all the rules. Again, this may depend on how many rules you already know, but I do recommend that you at least check all the rules and then do exercises for each of these rules. Then I recommend that you continue with reading. In this case, you're just going to learn all the question types, and then you're just going to learn the strategies. Remember, this is not really about how well you read. This is just learning which question types are going to be answered with which specific answers, which specific strategies. And finally, I recommend that after doing grammar and after doing reading, you're going to do math. Now, in math, I recommend that you learn every single topic. Do not skip any topic. Some of you may think that you already are very familiar and you're already good at certain topics like geometry or percentage. Still, do not skip it. If you feel that the exercises are too easy, then focus on doing them faster, doing in your head, doing without using a calculator, do them without using pen and paper, but do not skip it. Do every single exercise for every single topic, okay? And after you have finished doing your grammar, your reading, and your math, then you can start doing practice tests. Now, how should I do my practice test? Well, you're going to take a full practice test, and then you're going to review every single question in that practice test. So when I say every single question, I don't mean every single question that you got wrong. I mean every single questions, the correct and the mistakes. Why? Because you may get a correct question by just having guessed, and you want to check it to know what exactly is the reasoning behind the answer. In math, it also happens that you may get the right answer in math for doing the right procedure, but then you may have taken too long, or you may have doing too many movements before actually reaching the answer. So you want to review every single question so you can improve both on your timing and on your reasoning. After you have reviewed every single question, then you're going to do another practice test, and then you're going to repeat. And you're going to do this for as long as it takes until you reach the score that you want, until you reach your goal. Now, how should we time this? This is very important for you to plan your study for the SAT. Now, the grammar should take between 10 to 12 hours in total. for just learning the rules and the exercises. Reading takes between 10 also 12 hours, but in 10 hours you'll be fine for theory and practice. Math is the longest, hardest part of studying for the SAT. In total, both the theory and practice is going to take you around 70 hours. Now, from these 70 hours, only doing every single topic of the theory and from 5 to 6 examples or exercises for every topic is going to take you approximately 42 hours. The rest, the other 28 hours, are going to be spent doing the exercises in the book that you decide to use, or reviewing your mistakes, or reviewing certain extra exercises that you decide to take. Now, this is really important, so you can add the hours up so you know how long in advance you should start studying for your SAT before your deadline. Now, this is the recommended material. I'm going to put links in the description of this video. This is the material that I use for my classes, for my students. So both for reading and writing, for all the verbal, I use the Erica Meltzer books. So I use the new digital versions for the SAT. Although if you have the old versions, this in the case of the grammar is going to be the same. So the new SAT is the same as the old SAT for the grammar. But if you have the old version of the reading book, you have to use the new one. The old is no longer useful for you because the reading has changed a lot. Now, in the case of math, I use the Panda book. For this is my main book. I use this for all the topics. I make my students do every single exercise in the Panda book, and then I use the Barron's book as a backup for certain exercises because there are a couple of topics in the Panda book that don't have too many exercises, so I use the Barron's book. Now, I do not recommend that the Barron's book be your primary source. I recommend that you use it as a backup. Why? Because the level of difficulty for the math of the Barron's book is higher than the SAT. Now, some people have the misconception that if they study or they practice for harder math, for harder exercises, then they're going to perform better in the SAT, which is completely false. What you want is to practice with exercises and with a level of difficulty that is as similar as possible to the real deal. You want to practice for the exact same level or near the same level. Okay. I also don't recommend that you do practice tests from any editorial that is not an official source. I recommend that you only use official sources. You can use Khan Academy, but do not do practice tests from any other editorial. Now, finally, about the tutor, my recommendation is that if you use a tutor, you want to focus on two things. You want to focus on a tutor where you feel comfortable with, okay, but not too comfortable that you get lazy, and that you focus on not wasting class time. You don't want to hire someone to watch you do practice tests or to watch you do the long readings. You want someone to help you understand the things you cannot understand on your own, and to help you solve or check the mistakes that you could not check on your own. Again, most of the work you're going to do them, you want to do it on your own. Most of the work is on you, and then you use your tutor as a kind of person who is just going to guide you and help you with the things that you could definitely not do on your own. Okay, this is the end of the video. I'm gonna post another video about the strategies for correcting mistakes and the strategies for each specific section. If you have any questions or comments, just write them down in the comments, or you can also send me a private direct message. You can check all the links on the description, and hope this is helpful for you, and see you in another video. Bye.